I have so many different tools and techniques that I want you to try and to really integrate into your life so that you can be well. And I think that's so important because it's only when you're well can you do your most important work in life, which is to share your gifts and to help make the world a better place.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and on the podcast today, I'm really excited to share with you my conversation with Dr. Tsai. She is a board-certified physician, best-selling author, mindfulness teacher, speaker, and life coach who is committed to helping high achievers live their best life with ease. And I so enjoyed this conversation with Cindy, and she really speaks from experience. She's a high achiever. She's a perfectionist. She's someone who has lived her whole life, I think, working towards having an impact. And she knows what it means to be burned out and to be overwhelmed and to be in a space where you feel stuck. And so she created the success story method. And we talk all about that method in today's new episode. It has 3 pillars: calm, confidence, and curiosity. And you'll hear us dive into each of those pillars. But what I really enjoyed the most was our conversation, I think, about redefining our inner critic and changing that inner voice. And so much of it just goes back to developing a mindfulness practice for ourselves. And so often we are conditioned to look outside of ourselves for the answers. And so this conversation really dives into how to develop self-trust and have this ability to look within. She shares throughout the conversation different tips and strategies for building up your confidence and regulating this fear response that comes with trying to stay calm. And then we dive into curiosity and what that means. And so much of it is about connecting to fun and joy for yourself and really allowing yourself to explore the things that I think you loved to do as a kid. So I just so enjoyed this conversation with Cindy. I think it is filled with pearls and nuggets of wisdom. Her experience as a physician and life coach is really invaluable. And she just came out with a new book. It's called So Much Better: Life-Changing Strategies to Develop Calm, Confidence, and Curiosity to Become Your Own Inspiring Success Story. And I just so enjoyed hearing about how Cindy has become her own inspiring success story too. Now more than ever, I just think it's so important that we have reliable resources that we can turn to. And that's where today's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. So I would love to share with you a little bit more about BetterHelp. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. And it's easy and free to change counselors if you don't think the person you've matched with is a good fit. And no matter where you're listening to Seek the Joy podcast right now, you can also use BetterHelp because the service is available for people worldwide too. I just think it's so valuable to talk to someone about what it is that you're going through, whether that's anxiety, depression, grief, loss, changes at work, or friendship dynamics or relationships, or you want to talk about the challenges of the last couple of years. And BetterHelp offers a broad range of expertise in their counselor network. So you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions too, which I still think is a game changer. I really want you to live a happier, more joyful, and just ease-filled life. That's why I share these conversations with you. And so I'm just excited to share that as a listener of Seek the Joy podcast, you will get 10% off your first month by going to betterhelp.com/seekthejoy. Join over 1 million people and counting, taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/seekthejoy. The link will also be included in our show notes. I think the timing of this conversation with Cindy is really amazing too, because over the last several years, we've all been under so much stress, this sense of chronic stress and its impact on the body. And there's so much that we can do to help ourselves. And a lot of it comes down to regulating our own fear response, recognizing that we're not in the jungle being chased by a tiger, but we've got real life stressors here today too. And then it's about rewiring this programming that we have for ourselves to develop greater confidence, and then being curious to connect with your own inner wisdom. So as always, I cannot wait to hear what you think about this one. Make sure to join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy Podcast everywhere. And if you're enjoying the podcast, hit follow, hit subscribe, share this episode with a friend. What else? Oh, Cindy has a TED Talk coming out at the end of September, so make sure to follow her to tune in once that goes live. And I'm just excited to share this with you. So without further ado, let's dive into this one, Becoming Your Own Inspiring Success Story with Dr. Cindy Tsai. Cindy, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I know you just came out with a new book. Congratulations. It's called So Much Better, Life-Changing Strategies to Develop Calm, Confidence, and Curiosity to Become Your Own Inspiring Success Story. So, I have to start this out by asking, how did you become your own success story?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So, I think for me, I've always been this high achiever and perfectionist ever since I was young. And I worked super hard. I was focused on becoming a physician because that was really how I wanted to help people. I was always very health conscious and really wanted to be healthy and well and help others do the same. And so for me, I worked really hard going to all the top schools and training and essentially checked off all the boxes, right? And doing all the right things. And yes, I'm very grateful that everything went smoothly. I was working as a primary care physician. I was a medical director, and on the surface, everything looked great, right? And I got sick along the way. I burnt out. And so I think those moments really helped me pause and reflect and think about what is really important to you, right? Like what's going to be really fulfilling and fill you up and make you happy and be joyful and bring all of that into your everyday. And so in my own journey of reflection, coming into contact with things and tools like mindfulness and coaching and all these other practices, really allowed me to better align with who I am at the core. And I think when you really come into contact and reconnect with that part of you, that's when you're inspired, you're excited, and all of these things almost like fall into place in a sense. And so it inspired me to transition into coaching, into integrative medicine, into being a speaker, and all of these things. And it's been just such a wonderful journey. And I'm really excited to be able to share this.
I so appreciate what you shared because I think so many of us, myself included, can really resonate with what you said of, I was always a high achiever. I was a perfectionist. This is who I am. And I love what you said, that you always wanted to have an impact, but inevitably through that journey of striving for that impact, you negatively had an impact on yourself and your own life. And I'm curious, were there any questions or things that you asked yourself to really help you figure out this at this point in time in your life where you were burned out? Sounds like you were burned out, maybe a little unfulfilled, like just didn't feel like you were in the place that you were supposed to be. Were there any questions or things that you asked yourself to help you navigate that time? Because I think it's one
Yeah.
thing to feel that way, but it's another to fully recognize it for yourself.
Yeah, I think along the way, really starting to slow down and pay attention to how I was talking to myself, how I was talking to other people. I think one thing I really remember is, um, I guess, complaining in a sense to people around me about how stuck I felt. I was like, oh, I can't change this. I can't do this. And I see this in a lot of physicians. Also, I work with a lot of physicians and also other professionals who've had to go through a lot of training, right? They're like, oh, I already spent so many years studying and, going through all the school and training and rotations to get here. And to your point, it's like we almost get fixated on this identity. Like it's such a big part of us that we feel like we can't change. And so I think it's about really recognizing, coming back to yourself, right? Bringing the attention back to yourself and having these gentle, kind, compassionate conversations with yourself with a lens of openness and curiosity, and to understand like, hey, what's going on, right? Like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I saying I'm stuck? And I think when you're in the midst of it, it's really hard to see anything else, right? It's like, yeah, of course I'm stuck. There are no other options. What are you talking about? It's like, I don't know what else to do. This is what I've been focused on all, for like most of my life. There are no other options. And you kind of get into that kind of that trap in a sense. And so that's why it is so helpful to work with other people, to have mentors, to just like have a space to talk about this. And I think a lot of times, and I'm so glad with Brene Brown, the talk of vulnerability and all these things, right? Just how important it is to really be present and acknowledge what's going on, right? And
Definitely.
Self-compassion, all of these things.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's just recognizing that you are stuck, like having that moment of awareness in that moment to say, oh, that is actually how I feel. Because sometimes I think we run so heavily on autopilot that we don't even recognize that, oh, wait, this is the feeling I have. This is the emotion I have. This is where I am in this moment. So even just having, I think, that level of awareness is tied so heavily to practicing mindfulness for yourself. And I think having a mindfulness practice, which can look like so many different things. And I know that this is something that you talk about in the book, because my impression of what I've, like seen so far with your new book is you talk about, okay, like they're almost like these three pillars, right? Like calm, confidence, and curiosity. And this element of calm for me, as I was doing my due diligence ahead of this conversation, is it's about developing this mindfulness practice for yourself, recognizing when you're stuck. And maybe a little bit of it is what you said earlier about pausing and being more open. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that, because so I don't know about you, but I've got like this voice in my head all the time that's like, no, you can't do that thing. Who do you think you're fooling? The imposter syndrome is real. Like it's so real. We talk about it on the podcast all the time. And so I'm curious what that has been like for you, or if there's advice or tips or strategies that you can share with whomever is listening today about how we can start to, I think, calm that inner voice so that we can remain more open.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the three pillars. And basically, the three pillars are calm, confidence, and curiosity. And all three components make up the inspiring success story method that I created and outlined in the book. And so the first pillar, calm, is really about regulating your nervous system so that you can be grounded and secure. And so you probably have heard and know that our brains are wired for survival. It's constantly scanning for threats. And when people hear this, they're like, well, what do you mean threats, right? But the threats today are very different from thousands of years ago. Like,
hopefully we're not running away from like a tiger in the jungle or something, but we've got probably the modern day equivalent, which is the email that has to go out by 5 p.m. or the deadline or the surgery or whatever it might be.
Requesting a raise, or like going on a first date with someone you just, you met online, right? Like all these things. And so that, those threats are, basically turn on this sympathetic nervous system. And then that causes a lot of stress, tension, anxiety, poor sleep, and all these things. And so it's really a reminder that our mind and our bodies are connected, like they're not separate. And so calm is about really learning to retrain the nervous system so that you can be grounded, right? You can recognize when you're being activated and stressed, and then learning techniques to calm your system down, which is usually through activating your parasympathetic nervous system to counter that. So, techniques like breathing and all those things to help you get into your body is
Mm.
helpful for that.
Okay, what you just said, we have to take a pause real quick.
Yeah.
What you said about getting into your body is huge because I recently had a conversation with a friend. Her name is Kelsey Abbott. She's the host of the Find Your Awesome podcast, and we were talking, and I was telling her how I just get stuck in my head like all the time, like I'm just stuck up there. And she said, "Yeah, and of course you start to doubt yourself because you're not in your body." And I
Mhm.
think it's so true. If you can do something, whether it's breathing, meditation, reading, taking a walk, doing something that allows you to get back into your body, it's amazing that sense of sort of um, calm that you begin to experience because you start to become more in touch with yourself. So I think it's so interesting this like inner critic that comes up or being like judging ourselves. So much of it sometimes comes because we're not allowing ourselves to be present, be in the body. We're stuck in our heads, we're stuck somewhere else. So I just had to hit pause on what you just said because I think it's so relevant and it's so true. And when you have so much stimulation around you and coming at you, it's even more challenging to get back into your body.
Absolutely. I mean, our world today is constantly going. We receive
Mhm.
like so much information like coming at us at all times, right? Like,
All the time. Like if even if you think about like when you're just out walking to like on a commute or somewhere, all
yeah,
the other people, the sounds on the street, your phone's buzzing, your phone's ringing, you're looking at your Instagram, the traffic lights, like there's so much. Right now, someone just honked the horn outside. Like there's so much going on
I feel
all
like we
the
should take a
time.
breath right now.
I'm down. I'm down because it's so true, like there's just so much stimulation all the time.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to share a couple tools, but the simplest thing, just talking about the breath, one of
Mhm.
my favorites is called the cleansing breath. And this is where you simply take an inhale through your nose and then you exhale through an open mouth, releasing any stress or tension you're holding on to.
Mm.
And I mean, that took like 2 seconds,
2
right?
seconds. But I think it goes to show that we have tools at our disposal. We just need to remind ourselves of them. And it's not something you have to go out and look for. Like
Hmm.
the practice of breathing, taking that mindful cleansing breath, you
Yeah.
have at your disposal all the time.
Yeah.
And I think part of the overstimulation is sometimes we forget we have those tools. Like, I don't know, like I'm sure there's someone out there that can relate to this. I used to hold my breath all the time, like
Hmm.
all the time. And then someone said to me, "Are you breathing?" Like straight up someone said, "Are you breathing?" And I said, "Oh, no, not really. Wait, hold on." And I realized because I was carrying so much stress in my body and I was so somewhere else, I wasn't breathing. So
Yeah.
reminding yourself you have those tools at your disposal, huge. Huge.
And really, just from a physiological perspective, the reason breathing can be so helpful and also deep breaths, especially, is
Mhm.
because when I mentioned the sympathetic nervous system and then its counterpart, the parasympathetic nervous system, there's one main nerve in our bodies called the vagus nerve that helps to regulate and activate that parasympathetic relaxation response. And so the nerve kind of, runs through, from kind of the head into the chest. And so when we take a deep breath, when we're expanding our rib cage, it can stimulate the vagus nerve as it goes through the chest. And
Mm.
so that's why, a lot of times when we're tense, when we're stressed, the breath gets shallow, right? And then we kind of take these very short breaths that you were mentioning, and people might think we're not breathing
Mhm.
anymore.
Mhm.
But every time you kind of take that pause and just take a couple seconds to breathe and really feel that oxygen coming in, feeling your chest expand, you're activating that parasympathetic system through the vagus nerve. So
Mhm.
that is something that hopefully will be
Mm.
helpful to remember.
I think it will be. And it's so interesting as you talk about the tool of using our breath And if you just think about for a moment, I think the impact that just breathing and allowing yourself to breathe can have, I think, on just boosting your well being in general and allowing yourself to be more present and engage. Part of that for me too, as I think about that, is these are tools to help boost your self trust, boost your self confidence, remind yourself that we have these tools like within that they're at our disposal. Because I don't know about you, but I think so often we look outside of ourselves for help, assistance,
Validation.
guidance, validation, all of the
Mhm.
things. And so I'm curious,
Well,
I
that's
don't
probably
know
a
what,
really good segue for me to talk
yeah.
about confidence.
Please, because that's where I was trying to mentally get to, is because I think there's such an interesting bridge between calm and confidence when you look at,
Mhm.
viewing the world as I've got my own back versus can you please reassure me? It's like
Yeah.
it's a total flip of a switch, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I talk about the confidence pillar, I am focused on helping people develop a strong sense of self-belief.
Mm,
And
mhm,
this is really when you actually unlearn the old programming and rewire your brain.
mm,
So you're looking at we're examining, we're letting go of old thought patterns, beliefs, and we're actively creating new ones that bring you to success, to your ideal, to your joy and ease and all of that.
mhm.
And as we've seen in the research with neuroplasticity, this idea that brain cells can constantly regenerate and make new pathways to strengthen like thoughts, beliefs, and habits. It's like, when you go work out, you're building muscle, right? Like you don't get toned arms just from doing one rep,
But
but
how great
you
would it be
gotta
if we could? Come on, like, it would be so great if we could, but it's true, like, it takes practice and repetition and, working those muscles. But damn, it would be so
exactly.
great if we could just go, "Oh, I have self-confidence. Oh, I'm
I
super toned. Oh,
know.
you know what I mean?" But that's not how life works. It's all about the lessons, and everything that comes to help build on that confidence for you
Yeah.
over time.
But it's a process, but it's not, I think the important thing is to remember that every little bit counts,
Yes.
right? And so it's remembering, like, okay, it's not getting frustrated when you kind of hear that inner critic voice again. You're
Mm,
like, oh, okay, right? This inner critic has been with you for how many years, right? Decades, whatever. And then to suddenly bring that lens of compassion, like, it's going to take a little bit of practice and
it
time, but
is.
it's not going to take decades, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't take as much time to unlearn it, but it's just being intentional about it.
Mm. Mhm.
And I think, to your point, I really see this a lot where we have a tendency to look external, right, for
Mhm.
all of these things. And I always like to say that just even think about it, right? Like if you're always thinking about, okay, that job, that car, that vacation, the bags, like whatever it is, thinking that that's going to be the key to being happy, to your joy, to all the things.
Yeah.
But do you really have control over any of those things?
No.
Right? And that's all
No.
external.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so the solution, the key is really to start from the inside out,
Mhm. I'm
right?
curious
Mhm.
about that though. Like, how do you start from the inside out? Like, are there tips or tools or strategies? Or I know the book probably goes into it, but is there one that maybe you can share? Because I think that's what it is. It's confidence evolves over time. And I love what you said that it really all comes down to being intentional and to your intention. But how do we start to build that muscle? Is there a good place to start maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the most helpful ways for me personally is through thought work and coaching. And it's really about really paying attention to your thoughts and your internal language.
Mhm.
And so, a very simple tool to just start is even just something I call a thought download, where you just take a piece of paper, 5 minutes, set a timer, and just allow yourself to write
Mm.
everything that comes, anything that's in your brain and to write it without filter.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Mhm.
I think when the time is up, it'll be really interesting to just see what's going on in your head.
Mhm.
And, because it really comes down to awareness, right? We can't change what we don't know. And we could like all day put up this front of like, okay, I'm really confident, I know what I'm doing. But if internally there's a mismatch, it's going to be a struggle and it's going to be really hard, right? Like it's almost like you're just it's not sustainable, right? So the point is really to help you align internally, so that what you give off and radiate is just that sense of confidence and being in that state of like trusting, full belief, like having your own back. I think is just such a use and such an important skill that I wish we were all taught in school.
Me too. I wish there were so many things we were taught in school.
Right?
Developing self-confidence, how to do my taxes. Like there are just like we spend all this time learning how to use a recorder and like things that I don't even do. And now I'm as an, we're full-blown adults here and I'm like still Googling like things that we should have learned in school. But I think what's so interesting, I love this tip about doing sort of a brain dump and putting everything on a piece of paper. Um, when someone is done with those 5 minutes, do you recommend that they read what they've written down, that they kind of close the book and walk away? Because I think it can be so tempting then to spend time sort of revisiting that brain dump. I'm curious what
Mhm.
you do for yourself.
Yeah, well, so there are different ways to work with this. So I think that if you're doing a brain dump for the purpose of really just um, for just being increasing your awareness, I
Mhm.
think it can be helpful to quickly scan what you wrote down, but not to the point of like being super nitpicky of, oh my gosh, I made a spelling mistake or whatever, but just a general theme and assessment of like, oh, how interesting. I wrote that like this will never work, or I'm so oh,
Mm.
there's so much to do. I wrote that kept coming up like 5 times. That's probably a sign,
Something to look at.
something's going on, right?
Mhm.
Like that, I think is a more helpful, productive way to use it as opposed to, and really developing that sense of, so I think if you are going to go back to look at it, you also want to make sure you're in a good space yourself. And by that, I mean, pretend that you're an observer, like you're a
Mm.
third person, like coming in, you're looking at this piece of paper to be like, oh, let's see what's on there, right? And being open and curious to see how, like, oh, what's coming up, what's going on, as opposed to a lot of times, when we don't set that intention, we tend to just kind of get sucked in and be like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do this. I suck,
Mhm.
right? Like, and get into that negative spiral, which isn't helpful,
Right. Yeah.
right?
I think that's so true. It's about what is the intention behind doing sort of that brain dump on the page and then sort of a proceeding accordingly. But there's something that you said I thought that was really interesting. Um, if there's a common theme that kind of keeps coming up for you, that means it's something to look at. And that's something to, I think, it's part of that unlearning of old programming that you were talking about when we started diving into this element of confidence. But I also think part of confidence has to be in some ways learning how to advocate for yourself. And I think part of that like self-advocacy is being able to turn the tide with respect to how you speak to yourself. And I'm curious
Mhm.
what you've seen for that too, because advocacy in all forms, whether you're advocating for yourself or advocating for others or a cause that you care about, can often be challenging. And we can often, I think, have a lot of um, fear around that element of advocacy. So I'm curious what your thoughts are maybe with respect to this connection between confidence and self-advocacy in this way.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I put these pillars together because
Hmm.
to your point of there is a lot of fear that comes up when we're doing something new or foreign or, uncertain. And I think especially when you're really passionate about something, when you feel like, you want to advocate for someone, something yourself, but it's new to you, you're like, well, I don't know how to do it, right?
Hmm.
And then that sense of fear comes up. And so that's why it's important to have those calm techniques to really
Yeah.
stay grounded, right? And kind of calm that fear response down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, it's important to make sure you're staying grounded, because when you're in fear, like it messes everything up, right? You're like not able to think logically, you react, like you're just not being like the best self you can be. And so I think with self-advocacy, that's definitely something I think, is so important for people to recognize. I think a lot of times we've been trained again to look external. And then this idea even of like, say in a relationship, and you're like, well, I find that sometimes maybe you're not being, I guess in terms of communication, right? Maybe not sharing all of your thoughts or, desires and things like that. And then it's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you should know, right? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
no, like, nobody can read your mind, right? And then we kind of get into this like blaming cycle and stuff. And so I think it's about really when you are confident, when you know your value,
Mm.
right? I think that comes easily of like, well, of course, like I said, I want to go eat Japanese food or like, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I see this also from a health perspective, as I'm going to be sharing in my TED talk about how that I think a lot of times when patients go through health challenges, you go see a doctor, and then you kind of get some type of treatment, and you might have other things you want to try or whatever, but maybe it's something that's not necessarily part of that physician's prior experience or whatever. And then they might not be able to recover as fast or whatever, all these things. And so I do think it's very important to just be your own best friend, be your own advocate, and
Yeah.
really pay attention to what's going on, right? Like if it's not working for you, it's not working. And to give yourself permission really to
Mm-hmm.
explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So speaking of exploring, I know the third pillar is curiosity. So how does that one come into play?
Yeah. So curiosity is really about finding the fun, the
Mm.
creativity, and connecting to your true self and wisdom. And I like to say that we all have our own gifts to share. But when you're disconnected with who you are, it's like you're walking in a maze blindfolded. You're
Mm.
already lost, and on top of that, you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to bring in that element of curiosity. You can do this through things like journaling, right? A lot of reflection, and also doing the things that were really fun to you, especially as a child. That
Yes.
sense of like
Yes.
inner child play, and all of that, which I'm sure with joy you've seen so much of, right? So much of it
Yeah.
is tapping into that part of us that oftentimes we've kind of ignored for a
Yeah. It's so true because when you allow yourself to connect to what's fun for you and you explore this element of curiosity, and so much of what is fun for us as adults is actually what was fun for us as kids. If you think about like, what were you doing as a kid? Were you playing in the dirt? Were you running around the playground? Were you doing arts and crafts? Like, what did you love? Was it about being outside? Was it, whatever? Think about those things. And there's something that you can do as an adult that really connects with that aspect of your inner child. I'll never forget. It was like summer 2020. Like, we're in the height of like quarantine. And I
Yeah.
was like, I think I'm going to start beading bracelets. And I ordered like all these beads and whatever. And I was like sitting on like the floor of my living room for hours beading. And I had all these bracelets. And I was like, what was I doing? And then I realized as a kid, especially like when I would go to summer camp, like the craft hour was like my favorite. And I just started remembering
Oh,
all these things I used to do. And it just was such a fun way to spend my time. And it was so interesting too, because connecting to that element of fun, of that joy for yourself, is also such a beautiful opportunity to connect to a mindfulness practice for yourself in a different way. We often think of mindfulness as being journaling, sitting in meditation, breath work. It's actually part of it, in my opinion, is allowing yourself to sit in this space of fun and joy and curiosity, and the amount of like wisdom that comes from sitting in that space with yourself is so mindful. It's so meditative. And I think it can be really life changing. Does that sound too dramatic? I think it's real though. Like from the 5 years of doing this podcast and talking to
Yes.
so many people who have made, I think, that conscious choice to dive into what's fun for them and allow it to be their joy. There's something really special, I think, about that. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think for me, my book is really I call it a self-help book that's based in mindfulness,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because all three pillars are very much connected and related. And I define mindfulness as paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Beautiful.
I mean,
I
it
love
sounds
that.
simple, but if you break it down, like it's
It's
especially the
not.
without judgment part.
Yes. The judgment part is what really gets you, but it's that a practice of staying present. And I know throughout the book, and you've shared so many wonderful tips and strategies with us over the last, I don't know how long we've been talking, but throughout this conversation. So I think it's just goes to show when you connect with a method or a way for yourself that allows you to remain present, to really connect to that joy. And I think so much of it is about being mindful and really um reshaping so much of that programming that we've operated under for so long. So I'm so excited that you came on the podcast and we could share the book. And I have just a couple of questions for you before we close. I know that the book is like a mixture of like exercises and quotes and just it's so thought provoking. And I'm curious if there's a quote or an affirmation or something that you've held on to throughout your practice or throughout your journey of writing the book that has really helped guide you in this time.
Oh my gosh, so many. At the end of the book, I actually, because I start every chapter. Here's my book.
Yes.
I start, I start every chapter with a quote, and at the very end, I have this page I call Pearls of Wisdom with
Mm,
different quotes, ideas and things that I highlight. Um, I think that something that couple things that come up to me. So number one is fear is not the same as danger.
that's so good.
And I think it's such a helpful, important reminder. A lot of times when we get into fear, we feel like, oh my gosh, like we catastrophize. We feel like things
Yeah.
are never going to work. That inner critic goes crazy. Imposter syndrome sets in, like all these things, right? It's like a domino effect.
Hmm.
But I like to remind people that danger is like, being eaten by a tiger. It's like
Hmm.
something that's going to kill you.
Hmm.
But in today's world, a lot of the things that create fear don't lead to danger, right? We're not going to die if we like don't get that raise, or if we give feedback to our team member.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's really remembering that perspective, and then knowing how to calm that fear response, right? So that it doesn't continue to block you and keep you stuck.
I love that. Fear is not the same thing as danger, and it's all about perspective. All about perspective. All right, so I've got to ask you the question I ask everyone
Okay.
that comes on Seek the Joy podcast, and that is, what is your biggest dream?
My biggest dream, huh? Um, well, so I think for me, having all the medical training, that background, and overall, I really see myself as just like I'm most passionate about wellness
Hmm.
and just helping people live a very balanced life with ease. And so I would really love to share all of the resources, the trainings, and things in a way to as many people as possible so that they can be well, they can live their best life, and to do it with ease,
Mm.
right? Because I think a lot of times we know that you can work super hard, you can hustle and do all the things, but that's really the surest way to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I think, empowering others, to bring in different tools and techniques, make it their own, right? Because everyone's different. So the things you need are different. Like I always say, what works for me may not be what works for you, but I have so many different tools and techniques that I want you to try and to really integrate into your life so that you can be well. And I think that's so important because it's only when you're well can you do your most important work in life, which is to share your gifts and to help make the world a better place.
And
Yeah.
become your own inspiring success story.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Thank you for this conversation. This was so fun. I so enjoyed it. Please share where everyone can find you, connect, learn more, buy the book, all of the good things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm available on social media. My handle is at Cindy Tsai MD. And also feel free to visit my website, cindyscimd.com. I have a free guide. It's 3 ways. It's called the Create Your Own Calm Guide, where you get 3 ways to end your overwhelm now. So you can get that at cindyscimd.com/calm, CALM. And then, feel free to check out my book. It's a bestseller. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It's called So Much Better, with life-changing strategies to develop calm, confidence, and curiosity to become your own inspiring success story.
Perfect. Everything is going to go in the show notes. We will make it so easy for everyone to find you, connect, learn more, and buy the book. And just thank you for this conversation. I think I've been trying to think like, what is my biggest takeaway from this? And I think ultimately it's about, being mindful of the impact we want to have in the world. But in order to do so, you've got to take care of you first. And you've got to, I think, develop that sense of calm. And so you can become more confident in who you are. And you've got the tools already within you at your disposal. So thank you for this. This was so wonderful.
This was wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Seek the Joy podcast is a production of Seek the Joy Media and created, produced, and hosted by me, Sydney Weiss. You can tune into all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're enjoying the show, hit follow and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Make sure to join the community, join the conversation on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are at Seek the Joy podcast everywhere. And don't forget, you can actually watch today's new episode and all of our episodes on our brand new YouTube channel. Click that link in the show notes to subscribe and tune in. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you right back here next week for another Seek the Joy Tuesday.